She stood at my gate, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding whatever soul she had left, and yelled, "You are not allowed to dig that well. HOA rules." Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the dry summer air. I put my shovel down slowly, staring at her without saying a word. The sun had been cooking the land for weeks, and my cattle were already feeling it. But this wasn't about rules. This was about control, and Karen loved control. I leaned against the fence, wiping sweat off my forehead. "Karen, this is my ranch. I own every inch of it. You don't have a say." She smirked, pulled a folded paper from her bag, and waved it like it was a royal decree. "This notice says you can't make any structural changes without HOA approval. And guess what? We're denying it." I almost laughed. My ranch was outside the HOA borders, always had been. She knew it. But before I could say a word, she added with a fake sweet tone, "If you dig one more scoop, I'll call the sheriff for destruction of property." She didn't know I was the sheriff once, retired now, but still with friends in all the right places. I didn't argue. I just smiled, took my shovel, and quietly covered the half-dug hole. "All right, Karen," I said calmly. "Noel." What I didn't tell her was that the well was for her cattle too, and by the end of the week, every drop of water that fed her 1,500 head of cattle would run dry. 3 days later, the heat wave turned brutal. The grass was brittle, the air thick, and even the wind felt like it had been baked in an oven. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching Karen's trucks rumble down the dirt road toward her cattle farm. She didn't know it yet, but the underground pipe that carried water from my spring to her land had been shut tight the moment I covered that well hole. By noon, I could hear shouting from her property. Cows bellowed loud and restless, the sound echoing across the valley. A few hours later, her shiny black SUV came flying up my driveway, dust curling behind it like smoke from a fire. She slammed the door and marched up, not knocking, just barging right into my porch space. "You cut the water," she accused, voice trembling, not from fear, but rage. I set my mug down slowly. "Karen, I didn't cut your water. I stopped my water from running into land I don't own." "That's illegal. You can't do that," she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. "Show me the law that says I'm required to give you free water." For a split second, she hesitated, her eyes flicking away, her lips tightening. That's when I knew she didn't have a clue about actual rights or ownership. She only had threats. "Fine," she said finally, stepping back. "I'll bring the HOA board. You'll regret this." I smiled, leaning forward just enough for her to notice the badge still mounted on my wall from my years as sheriff. "Karen, I think you're the one who's about to regret it." The very next morning, I woke up to the rumble of multiple trucks pulling up to my gate. Karen wasn't alone. 3 other HOA board members stood beside her, each holding clipboards like they were about to audit the Pentagon. One man even had a camera rolling, probably hoping to catch me breaking the law. Karen shouted through the bars of my gate, "We have the authority to enter and inspect." I stepped outside slowly, my boots crunching against the gravel, every movement deliberate. "Authority?" I asked, locking eyes with her. "On my ranch?" She jabbed her clipboard in my direction. "You're in violation of HOA water regulations, and we have the right to—" I cut her off. "Karen, your HOA line ends 2 miles that way." I pointed toward the dusty road behind her. "This ranch has never been under your jurisdiction, and you're trespassing." The man with the camera scoffed. We'll get the sheriff down here. That's when I grinned. Please do. Karen smirked, thinking she'd won. She pulled out her phone, called the sheriff's department, and in less than 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled up. But her confident smile faltered when the deputy stepped out. A man I'd trained myself back when I wore the badge. "Morning, Sheriff." He greeted me with a nod, loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen's face turned pale. "Sheriff, you said you were retired." "I am," I said, walking toward the gate. "But respect? Well, that doesn't retire." The deputy glanced at her, then at me. "Want me to remove them from your property?" I just crossed my arms. "Not yet. I want her to hear exactly what's coming next." Karen stiffened, her fingers tightening around that clipboard like it was a shield. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing this wasn't the ambush they'd planned. I stepped closer to the gate, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the hot air. "Karen, your cattle have been drinking from my spring for free for years. I never asked for payment, never set conditions. But the second you tried to stop me from digging my own well on my own land, you turned this into a war." She tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand. "And here's the thing. Wars have consequences. You've got 1,500 cattle depending on a water source that no longer exists for you. I shut the valve 3 days ago. You've probably got about 24 hours before the real damage starts." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that. You're killing my cattle." "No," I said firmly. "You did that the moment you cut ties with the one man keeping them alive." The deputy cleared his throat, clearly enjoying the moment. "Karen, trespassing on this property again will result in immediate arrest. And from what I hear, impersonating authority outside your jurisdiction is already a crime we can talk about." Her face flushed deep red, but I could see the cracks, panic creeping in under that layer of arrogance. She stepped back, whispering something to her board members before storming toward her SUV. As she slammed the door, I called out, "Better start calling water trucks, Karen. You're on your own now." The engine roared, dust swallowing her retreat. But I knew she wasn't done. She'd be back, and next time she'd play dirtier. 2 days later, I found out just how dirty she could play. I was walking back from checking the fence line when I saw 2 men in reflective vests kneeling near my water valve. At first glance, they looked like utility workers, but something was off. Their truck had no company logo, the plates were from out of state, and the way they froze when they saw me said everything. I approached slowly. "Morning, fellas. Can I help you with something?" One of them straightened up, holding a clipboard. "Routine maintenance. HOA sent us to restore water flow to the cattle farm." I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "That's funny because this valve sits entirely on private property, and the HOA has no jurisdiction here." The other guy muttered. "Karen said you'd cooperate," then stopped himself. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped record, and aimed the camera right at their faces. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to step away from that valve, leave this property, and thank whatever higher power you believe in that I'm in a good mood today." They hesitated until the sound of a vehicle came from behind. It was the same deputy pulling up with his lights on. He got out, saw the scene, and chuckled. "Trying to mess with the sheriff's water boys? That's bold." The fake workers were cuffed in under a minute. As the deputy led them away, he leaned in and whispered to me, "They just admitted Karen paid them to do this. That's tampering with a water supply, felony level." I watched their truck disappear down the road, a slow grin spreading across my face. If Karen wanted to turn this into a legal battle, I was ready. What she didn't know was that I had something she couldn't fight, and it was about to end her cattle business for good. That night, I sat in my office with the blinds drawn, a single desk lamp lighting up the stack of papers in front of me. These weren't just random documents. They were the original land and water rights deeds for the entire valley, signed over a century ago. My grandfather had secured them, and they clearly stated that every drop of spring water on my property and every pipe connected to it was under my sole control. Karen's cattle farm was entirely dependent on a friendly use agreement my family had allowed decades ago. And here's the kicker. There was no renewal date, which meant I could end it effective immediately with one signature. The deputy had already agreed to be present when I served her. I wanted witnesses because Karen loved twisting stories. By the next morning, I was parked at the end of her long gravel driveway. She came out of her barn looking more worn than usual, probably from dealing with thirsty, restless cattle. When she saw me holding a thick envelope, she crossed her arms. "Here to apologize?" she sneered. I stepped forward and handed her the papers. "I'm here to end this." She tore the envelope open, her eyes scanning the first page, her face draining of color. This can't be legal." "It's more legal than anything you've done in the last month," I said, my voice steady. "You no longer have rights to my water. Effective today, the pipes will be removed." The deputy, standing a few steps behind me, added, "And you're under investigation for hiring men to tamper with that water supply. You might want to get a lawyer." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since this started, she had nothing to say. I turned to leave, but glanced back just long enough to add, "You should have let me dig that well, Karen. Would have saved you a whole lot of pain." By sunset, my crew had pulled every section of pipe leading from my spring to her property. The last chunk clanged into the back of my pickup, and with it, decades of goodwill ended in the dirt. The sound of thirsty cattle carried faintly over the dry wind, mixed with the distant roar of a diesel generator.